They didn't lower their voices. That was the point. "Sign it, Lena," Marjorie Ashford said, her pearls clicking as she leaned over the table. "You came into this family with a lunch tray. You'll leave with a suitcase and your pride, if you can still find it." Rain hammered the windows of the Ashford estate, washing lightning across the library's portraits. Across from her, Carter checked his watch, bored impatience on his face. His cologne couldn't hide a faint floral perfume that wasn't hers. 2 nights ago, she'd smelled it when he came home at dawn and said, calm as a banker, that the marriage had run its course. Mr. Devereaux, the family attorney, slid a folder toward her without meeting her eyes. Divorce decree, non-disclosure, vacate premises in 24 hours. On his settlement check for $3,000 was clipped to the last page like a tip. Lena's fingers tightened around the pen. Not because she feared Carter, because she couldn't afford a fight. Her mother's nursing home demanded another payment by Friday. The savings account was in Carter's name. Marjorie had already told half their town that Lena was after money. "I'm not asking for alimony," Lena said, voice steady. Carter finally looked up, eyes flat. "Don't make this dramatic. Just sign and go back to whatever you were." "A nobody," Marjorie added, savoring it. The words landed in a room full of people trained to look away. Mr. Devereaux stared at his legal pad. The housekeeper at the doorway pretended to adjust a lamp. Lena slipped her wedding ring off and set it beside the papers. The metal was still warm. Yeah, she wrote her name in clean, careful strokes. Each scratch of ink sounded louder than thunder. Marjorie snatched the folder the moment Lena pushed it forward, scanning for mistakes like she expected Lena to steal even now. Lena stood. "Goodbye, Mrs. Ashford." She walked toward the door, shoulders straight, refusing to run, until she noticed a tiny green light blinking above the portraits, hidden in the smoke detector. Someone had recorded every cruel word. By the time the cab dropped her at the edge of Bridgeport, her trench coat was heavy with rain, and the $3,000 check felt heavier. Lena Hart, the name on her nursing license, the name Carter never bothered to learn to spell, carried 2 modest suitcases up a narrow flight of stairs to a second-floor apartment that smelled like old radiator heat and lemon soap. And she set the bags beside a framed photo of her mother, Ruth, smiling before the strokes stole words from her mouth. At 5:15 a.m., she was already in scrubs, hair pinned tight, thermos in hand. Hospice didn't pause for heartbreak. Mrs. Navarro in room 12 liked her oatmeal thin and her blankets tucked like a soldier's bed. Mr. Jensen, a retired mechanic, pretended he wasn't scared and asked Lena to check the pressure on his oxygen line. One more time. Lena did, then did it again, because that second touch of care mattered more than her schedule. She had a habit the other nurses teased her about. She carried an extra sandwich and a clean pair of socks in her tote. "For whoever needs it," she'd say. Most days it was a patient's exhausted spouse. Some days it was the janitor working double shifts. Today it was her own stomach she ignored, by offering the sandwich to Mr. Jensen's daughter when the woman's hands shook too hard to open a vending machine granola bar. Lena smiled when she should, listened when it was easier to talk, and signed the discharge paperwork with steady handwriting, the same steady hand that had signed away her marriage hours earlier. During her lunch break, she called Ruth's nursing home. The billing clerk didn't bother with a greeting. "Ms. Hart, your payment didn't go through. If we don't receive it by Friday, we'll have to review services." "My account will clear," Lena said, though her banking app showed a red error. "Access denied." She stared at the screen until the letters blurred, then remembered the tiny green light in the Ashford Library. Someone had recorded them. Someone had proof of Marjorie's cruelty, of Carter's cold voice, and of the threats hidden between polite words. A text buzzed from an unknown number. "I have something you need. Don't go home tonight. Look behind you." Across the courtyard, a black sedan idled, engine humming as if it had been waiting since dawn. Lena lifted her head and froze. She went straight from the hospice ward to Willow Glen Nursing Center, still in scrubs, still tasting cheap coffee. Ruth's room was small and bright, A crocheted blanket on the chair, a Bible on the nightstand, and a plastic pill box labeled Monday to Sunday. Her mother's eyes tracked Lena the way they always did. Recognition first, then the slow fog of effort. "Hey, Mama," Lena said, forcing warmth. She checked the chart, then the oxygen, then the thin skin at Ruth's wrist where bruises bloomed like watercolor. Caregiving was a language Lena spoke fluently. What paying for it was another story. The administrator met her in the hallway with a practiced smile. "Ms. Hart, we need to talk about your balance. Your husband's card declined, and the account you listed for autopay is flagged." "My husband isn't my husband anymore," Lena said. The words cut, even whispered. "I'm sorry," the woman replied, not sounding sorry at all. "Without a verified payer, we can't hold this room past Friday. There's a waiting list." Friday. 4 days. Lena pictured moving Ruth. Ambulance fees, transfer paperwork, a new facility across town with strangers who wouldn't know Ruth hated ice water and panicked if the TV got too loud. Outside, her phone showed 3 missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize. When she finally called her bank, the representative spoke like she was reading from a script. "Your online access was revoked due to a security report filed by the primary account holder." Primary account holder? Carter. "I'm on the account," Lena insisted. "Not anymore, ma'am. A change request was submitted yesterday. In person." In person? While she was signing away her life in that library. By the time she reached her apartment, the courtyard was empty, the black sedan gone. Relief should have come. Instead, loneliness slid in, heavy and familiar. She checked her mailbox out of habit, expecting junk flyers. An official envelope sat on top, her name typed in block letters. The return address made her stomach drop. Connecticut State Board of Nursing. Her hands shook as she tore it open. The first line read, "Notice of complaint. Allegations of misconduct." Her license was the only thing keeping Ruth in a bed and food in Lena's fridge. If the board suspended her, she'd lose her job fast. The allegations weren't vague. They named a patient and a specific date. And the complaint was signed by Carter Ashford. 2 days later, the hospice director called an all-staff huddle in the break room, the kind held when budgets were tight or someone had died. A tray of stale muffins sat beside the coffee pot like an apology. "We've been selected as this year's beneficiary," Director Patel announced, tapping a glossy invitation. "The Bridgeport Aviation Heritage Gala. Big donors, big press. Their foundation is funding 6 new comfort care beds." The room exhaled. 6 beds meant fewer families turned away, but it also meant Lena's job might survive the next round of cuts. Then Patel's eyes found Lena. "They requested a licensed nurse to supervise the medical station on site. It's paid overtime." Lena's throat went dry. "Who's hosting?" Patel flipped the invitation around. On the front, under a silver-embossed skyline, was a photo of Carter Ashford in a tuxedo, smiling like a man who had never raised his voice in a mahogany library. "The Ashford Foundation," Patel said. "Keynote by Mr. Ashford. He's also presenting an award. We can't refuse." Patel lowered her voice. "If we disappoint them, donations vanish and beds vanish, including your mother's." By evening, the city was plastered with banners. Hangar 9. 1 night only. The gala would be held inside Harbor Airfield's restored aircraft hangar. Polished concrete dressed up with black carpet and gold ropes. Lena drove past during her commute and saw workers rolling in tall floral columns, sound equipment, and a massive LED wall that would live stream donor totals. Above the entrance, security cameras blinked in neat rows, each one angled to catch faces, hands, and any moment worth selling to the news. Inside, rehearsal audio drifted through an open side door. A microphone squealed, then a man's voice tested it, smooth, confident, familiar. Lena didn't need to see him to know. She sat in her car and opened the nursing board envelope again. The complaint date matched last month's shift, the night Carter insisted on picking her up early and surprised her at the unit. He'd been on camera then too, charming everyone, hugging her in front of patients. It wasn't charm. On it was positioning. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. Wear your badge. Bring your ID. Don't warn anyone. Lena looked back at the hangar. A stage light snapped on, spilling white glare over the empty floor, like an interrogation room waiting for its subject. And the printed staff lanyard on her seat read, Lena Hart, Stage Access. Carter Ashford loved hangars because they echoed. Every compliment bounced back bigger. Every camera flash turned him into legend. On the morning of the gala, he stood in Hangar 9 with a tablet in hand while stagehands tested the LED wall behind him. Donations live. His name already centered above the running total. Make sure the medical station is visible, he told the event manager. People like to see compassion. Compassion to Carter was branding. Marjorie swept in with a garment bag and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. The hospice director confirmed her shift, she murmured. Our little nurse will be here. Carter didn't answer. He was scrolling through Lena's life like it was an expense report. The bank account revocation had worked. The nursing board complaint had landed on schedule. He'd even called Willow Glen himself, using the foundation's letterhead to review Ruth Hart's payment status. One polite conversation, one implied threat, and the administrator was suddenly strict. Why bother? Marjorie asked. She signed. She's gone. Because she still exists, Carter said, jaw tightening. And existence creates questions. Questions were dangerous, and tonight he planned to announce the Ashford Foundation's new partnership with Hawthorne Aerospace. Sloan Hawthorne's father was on the board, and Carter wanted his seat next. A state advisory role, a photo with the governor, a future that didn't include the stain of a messy divorce. He checked his reflection in the dark glass of a vintage cockpit display. Perfect tux. Perfect smile. Perfect story. Devoted son, generous philanthropist, tragically burdened by an unstable ex-wife who couldn't handle the pressure. His phone buzzed. Sloan, can you keep her away from me tonight? I don't want drama. Carter typed back, already handled. Tonight he would replace Lena's memory with headlines and replace guilt with applause and power alone. He walked to the security desk near the entrance where monitors showed every angle of the hangar. Bar, my stage, donor lounge, even the service corridor. A row of green dots blinked steadily, recording. New directive, Carter told the head of security. If Lena Hart shows up emotional, you escort her out. Quietly but firmly, and keep the cameras rolling. The guard hesitated. Sir, she's staff. Carter slid a sealed envelope across the counter. Not after she receives this. On the front, in bold black print, were 3 words. Notice of suspension. Carter smiled and said, serve it to her on stage. Sloan Hawthorne arrived at Hangar 9 at noon, stepping out of a white SUV as if the tarmac belonged to her. She wore a cream blazer over a silk slip dress, hair glossy, smile practiced. The event team straightened when she passed. The volunteers whispered her name like a warning. Carter met her near the donor lounge. He kissed her cheek for the cameras, then angled his body to block the view. Tonight has to be perfect, he said. It will be, Sloan replied. Her eyes flicked to the LED wall. My father wants results, not speeches. If you want that board seat, you'll give him a scandal-free night. Marjorie appeared with a clipboard, delighted. Ms. Hawthorne, your place at the head table is confirmed. Sloan didn't look at her. Where's the nurse? On the schedule, Carter said, voice smooth. Medical station. She'll be invisible. Sloan's mouth curved. Nothing about her is invisible. She's the kind of woman donors remember because she makes them feel guilty. She leaned closer, perfume sharp. And guilt is expensive. That afternoon, Lena set up the medical station behind the velvet ropes. Blood pressure cuffs, bottled water, spare oxygen tubing, then a clean blanket folded tight. She clipped her badge on and tried not to think about Ruth's Friday deadline. The unknown texter hadn't responded since the message about not going home. A shadow fell over her table. Lena looked up and saw Sloane Hawthorne studying her like an item on an inventory list. "You're Lena Hart," Sloane said. Not a question. "Yes, ma'am." Sloane's gaze dropped to the badge, then to Lena's left hand, bare, ringless. "So the rumors are true. Carter has a type. Useful, quiet, grateful." Lena kept her voice even. "I'm here for the patients and the guests." "Good, stay there." Sloane tapped the table twice. "If you speak to the press, if you approach the stage, if you so much as look sad in a way that makes donors uncomfortable, security will remove you. I don't care if you're bleeding." A stagehand hurried by, and Lena noticed his phone angled toward them, recording. Sloane noticed too and smiled at the lens. Then she slid a folded card across the table. On it was tonight's seating chart. Carter and Sloane listed as future Mr. and Mrs. Ashford. Lena's stomach dropped as Sloane whispered, "You're about to watch him propose in front of the cameras." The hangar filled the way a storm fills the sky. Quiet at first, then all at once. Waiters glided with champagne flutes. A string quartet played beside a vintage biplane wrapped in soft gold light. Lena stood behind her medical table, stethoscope tucked into her pocket, watching donors in tuxedos and gowns pose under the Ashford Foundation step and repeat. At 7:10, Director Patel hurried over, cheeks flushed. "Lena, I need you to do me a favor," she said, avoiding eye contact. Security says your badge can't say nurse tonight. Something about pending review. They'll let you stay if you wear this." She held out a plain lanyard labeled Event Volunteer. Lena's throat tightened. "I'm licensed. I'm on duty." "I know," Patel whispered. "But if they pull our beneficiary status, we lose the beds." "Please." A couple nearby overheard. The woman in diamonds glanced at Lena's scrubs with polite disgust. "Is that the girl who tried to marry up?" she murmured to her husband, not bothering to lower her voice. "Poor Carter. He's so generous, even to former staff." Heat crawled up Lena's neck. She took the volunteer lanyard and clipped it over her badge like a muzzle. 10 minutes later, Marjorie Ashford swept past with Sloane on her arm, both shining for cameras. Marjorie's eyes landed on Lena and sharpened. How appropriate," she said, loud enough for the nearest cluster to hear. "Back where you belong, handing out Band-Aids and begging for attention." Someone laughed too loudly. A reporter's assistant lifted a phone, pretending to film the biplane but catching Lena's face. Above the ropes, a ceiling camera blinked, steady, unblinking, alive again tonight. Lena forced her hands to stay still. She focused on the blood pressure cuff, on the neat stack of consent forms, on breathing. A stage manager jogged up. "Volunteer, the donor lounge wants extra bottled water," he barked. "And don't touch any medical supplies. We had an incident." An incident. The word was a knife. Lena carried a case of water toward the donor lounge and stopped short when she heard Carter's voice through the half-open door. "Serve the suspension notice when the cameras are on," Carter said. "And make sure the board gets the witness statement tonight. If she panics, it proves my point." Mr. Devereaux replied softly, "What about her mother?" Carter laughed once. "Friday is leverage. Use it." Lena's fingers went numb around the plastic handle. Lena returned to the medical station with the case of water and set it down so quietly no one noticed her hands shaking. The donor lounge door had swung shut, sealing Carter's laughter inside, but the word stayed lodged in her ribs. Friday is leverage. She glanced up at the ceiling. Above the biplane, above the chandeliers of rented light, a row of black domes watched the floor. Every few seconds, a tiny red dot blinked. Recording, not for safety, for spectacle. A young AV tech rolled a cable past her table. Like his badge read, "Michael, Production." He nodded once, eyes apologetic. When he turned, his phone screen flashed an open camera app, paused on a frame of Sloane leaning close to Lena, lips curled. He didn't send it. He just let Lena see it. Her own phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Service corridor B. 2 minutes. Bring nothing. Against every instinct, she stepped away from the ropes and slipped behind a curtain into the staff hallway that smelt of bleach and warm metal. Corridor B was narrow, lined with equipment cases and a single exit sign humming green. A woman waited beside a stack of folded linens, short, gray-haired, in catering blacks. Lena recognized her at once. Darlene Quinn, the Ashford housekeeper who had adjusted a lamp while Lena signed the divorce papers. Darlene didn't waste time. That smoke detector in the library wasn't a detector, she whispered. It's a camera. Mr. Ashford had it installed after his father died. Says it keeps liars honest. Lena's mouth went dry. You recorded me. He recorded you, Darlene corrected. She pulled a slim flash drive from her sock and pressed it into Lena's palm. I swapped the card the night you left. Then I watched him upload the file to his cloud, librarycam_02. He thinks nobody in that house can read an upload receipt. She showed Lena a printed slip, wrinkled but clear. Upload complete, 2:11 a.m. User Cashford. Destination, Ashford Vault. On the back, a barcode and timestamp matched the night, and Darlene had circled it in ink. Footsteps echoed at the far end of the corridor. Darlene's eyes sharpened. If they suspend your license tonight, this proves motive and threats, she said. But you need one more thing. The notice he plans to serve you. The footsteps grew louder, fast, purposeful. A security guard rounded the corner and said, Ma'am, Mr. Ashford wants you on stage. Now. Security didn't touch her, but their presence did the job. The guard who had found her in Corridor B walked at her shoulder, as if she were a child about to bolt. This way, ma'am, he said, voice polite, hand hovering near his earpiece. Lena kept the flash drive hidden in her palm, nails digging into her skin. Darlene had vanished back into the linen stacks like she'd never existed. The corridor spilled them out near the main floor where donors mingled beneath the aircraft wings. Director Patel rushed up, relief and fear tangled on her face. Lena, I'm so sorry, she whispered. They said if you don't cooperate, they'll revoke the hospice grant. We can't lose those beds. Cooperate? Lena looked past Patel and saw Carter near the stage, laughing with the senator's aide, arm draped lightly around Sloan as cameras flashed. He didn't look at Lena directly. He didn't have to. Everything in the hangar moved for him. A volunteer coordinator shoved a clipboard into Lena's hands. Sign in, she snapped. Liability waiver. No waiver, no access. The page was thick with fine print. Lena scanned it fast and found the trap. She agreed she was not providing medical care, not acting as a nurse, and accepted removal at the discretion of the host. If she signed, she wasn't protected. If she refused, Patel's grant died, and Ruth's room died with it. Lena signed. A second sheet followed. Emergency contact, the coordinator said. I'm impatient. Lena wrote Ruth's name, then stopped. Her mother couldn't speak, couldn't advocate, couldn't fight. Her phone buzzed. Willow Glen. She answered with a tight, Hello? Ms. Hart, the administrator said. Mr. Ashford's office called again. They offered to cover your mother's balance, if you authorize a transfer to their preferred facility. Preferred facility meant cheaper care, farther away, a place that could hide neglect behind paperwork. I don't authorize anything, Lena said. A pause. Then we'll proceed with discharge planning Friday. The call ended. The music swelled. The stage lights brightened. A staffer approached with a sealed envelope and a forced smile. You've been summoned, he said. Mr. Ashford wants to acknowledge you. Lena's stomach turned as she saw the label. Connecticut Nursing Board. Service copy. And across the room, Carter raised his glass as if honoring her, and every camera lens swung toward Lena. Bright, hungry, merciless, tonight, all together. The host announced her name into the microphone. The applause was still rolling when Lena stepped onto the carpeted stairs beside the stage. The host beamed under the spotlights. "Bridgeport, give it up for the heroes who keep our community breathing," he said, and the LED wall flashed the Ashford logo like a halo. Carter took the microphone with an easy smile. "Tonight isn't about jets," he announced. "It's about heart." He nodded toward the hospice banner, then toward Lena. "And it's also about accountability." A hush spread. Lena felt every camera angle settle on her face. Sloane's hand rested on Carter's arm, her diamond bracelet glittering like handcuffs. Carter lifted the sealed envelope. "I'm sad to share that one of our on-site volunteers is under formal review by the Connecticut State Board of Nursing," he said. Gasps, murmurs. "Allegations involving patient safety. Serious ones." Lena's tongue stuck to her teeth. She looked to Director Patel, who stood rigid near the donor tables, eyes wet, unable to move. "Out of respect for the families we serve," Carter continued, "we can't allow her to represent the hospice tonight." He motioned to security. The guard at Lena's elbow opened the envelope and pulled out a letter stamped "Official Service." He angled it so the front row could read it. "You filed this," Lena managed, voice thin. Carter leaned closer, still smiling for the cameras. "I protected people," he whispered back. Then, louder, "Ms. Each heart has been instructed to leave the premises immediately." Lena reached for the microphone. The host smoothly stepped between them. The sound cut. Her lips moved, but the hanger heard only the orchestra starting again, drowning her. Someone in the crowd snickered, "Gold diggers always turn out crooked." Another voice added, "Poor Mr. Ashford." Heat flooded Lena's face. Her fingers curled around the flash drive in her pocket until it hurt. Over Carter's shoulder, she spotted Darlene near the service curtains, pale but watching. In the production pit, Michael stared at his monitor, jaw tight. Security guided Lena down the stairs. As they did, the guard unclipped her badge and dropped it into his pocket without looking. The LED wall zoomed on Carter and Sloane as if she had never existed, and then a woman near the hospice table shot to her feet. "That's a lie," she shouted. "Lena saved my father. She saved him." The entire hangar turned toward the woman with shaking hands and a hospice badge. The woman who shouted was in her 50s, hair pulled back, hospice badge swinging on a lanyard. Her voice cracked, but she didn't sit down. "My father was drowning in his own lungs," she said, turning in a slow circle so the cameras caught her face. "Nurse Hart stayed after her shift." She held his hand. "She called me at 2 a.m. so I wouldn't miss his last breath." A ripple ran through the crowd. Curiosity first, then discomfort. Phones rose like a field of mirrors. The host laughed too brightly. "Ma'am, thank you for sharing, but—" Carter raised one hand, gracious. "We all appreciate good stories," he said. "But the board doesn't investigate angels. They investigate facts." The woman's eyes filled. "Facts? Ask Dr. Mills. Ask Director Patel. She's the best nurse in that building." Director Patel flinched as if struck. She started forward, then stopped when Marjorie's stare pinned her in place. Around Patel, donors whispered, calculating. A man in a tux muttered, "Even if she's innocent, she's risky." A woman answered, "Ashford wouldn't lie on a stage." Lena stood at the bottom of the steps, the suspension letter trembling in her hand, heat pounding behind her eyes. Security nudged her toward the exit. The volunteer lanyard scratched her neck like a brand. As she passed the hospice table, the shouting woman reached for her. Lena couldn't stop. Cameras tracked her retreat, zooming on her wet lashes, her clenched jaw, the way she refused to beg. Outside the hangar doors, cold air slapped her. The music behind her swelled again, erasing her name. A guard held out her purse with 2 fingers as if it was contaminated. "You're done here," he said. Lena grabbed it and walked fast across the dark tarmac to the employee lot. Her car was gone. A fluorescent notice flapped on the asphalt. "Vehicle impounded. Authorized by event security. Her breath hitched. She dug for her keys, then her phone. The phone was there, but the key ring wasn't. Neither was the flash drive Darlene had pressed into her palm. On the screen, 3 new alerts stacked up. Account closed, shift suspended, discharge planning started. Lena leaned against the empty parking space, tasting rust, hearing the Gala applause faintly through the hangar walls. She understood then. Carter wasn't finished. With Ruth at stake, like someone had taken the evidence, and they knew exactly where to hit her next. Lena walked past the impound notice until the hangar lights were only a glow behind her. The employee shuttle stop was empty, the wind smelling of jet fuel and spilled champagne. She found a dark corner behind a maintenance shed and finally let her knees buckle. For 1 minute she couldn't breathe. Not from tears, those came later, but from the shame that still rang in her ears. Allegations, review, leave the premises. She pressed her forehead to the cold metal door and whispered the only prayer she had left. Lord, don't let them hurt my mother. Her phone buzzed again. Carter, authorize the transfer for Ruth tonight. I'll make the complaint disappear. Lena's thumb hovered. The easy path was right there, wrapped in one signature. When she pictured Ruth in a strange room, calling for Lena with a mouth that couldn't form words. She pictured Carter smiling while she thanked him. No, she breathed, and the words shook. She slid down to the concrete and emptied her purse with the slow care of a nurse laying out instruments. Wallet, badge clip, a crumpled patient thank you note, the volunteer lanyard, the suspension letter with its cruel stamp. Her keys were gone. Her car was gone. And the flash drive, still gone. Her chest tightened until pain flashed behind her eyes. I'm done begging, she told the darkness, voice flat, almost calm. I won't crawl for mercy. She forced herself to stand, wiped her face with her sleeve, and checked her shoes for gravel. That's when she felt the uneven lift beneath her left heel. She sat again, fingers fumbling with the insole, and a strip of tape clung to the foam. Under it was a tiny black drive. Darlene's voice came back to her, pressed into her palm, urgent, sock, and Lena realized the woman had expected a search. Relief hit so hard it made her dizzy. She held the drive like a heartbeat. Then she noticed a second piece of tape, this one on the back of the volunteer lanyard. A folded slip of paper was stuck there. Meet me at the chapel across from Willow Glen. Midnight. Come alone. Beneath the message was an initial. Lena slid the drive into her bra, zipped her purse, and turned, because the shed door handle was moving. Footsteps crunched nearby. A shadow crossed the gap under the shed door, and a man's voice murmured, Ms. Hart, don't move. The voice belonged to a uniformed airport security officer, broad-shouldered, breath-smelling of mint. He shone a flashlight across Lena's face and the spilled contents of her purse. Hands where I can see them, he said. You were reported for trespassing in a restricted zone. I was assigned here, Lena answered. She lifted her hospice lanyard. The volunteer tag dangled like a joke. He took the suspension letter from the top of her pile, skimmed it, then looked at her with a kind of bored pity. Tonight's host filed a complaint. You're no longer authorized. If I see you on this property again, you'll be arrested. He patted down her bag. Lena kept her spine straight, praying he wouldn't notice the flash drive pressed against her ribs. The paper slip with the chapel address stuck to the lanyard was gone. Someone had peeled it off. The loss hit her like a slap. That message was her only plan, and now it was missing. Then when the officer finally walked away, her knees shook so hard she had to grip the shed door to stay standing. Her phone rang. Willow Glen. Ms. Hart, the administrator said, voice clipped. Mr. Ashford has agreed to cover your mother's balance, effective immediately. His office sent transfer papers to our fax. I didn't sign anything, Lena said. We have a guardianship consent on file, the woman replied. Your husband's attorney provided it. Lena's heart slammed. He's not my... Ma'am, the document is notarized. A pause. A transport team is scheduled for 7 a.m. If you dispute it, you can file an emergency motion. Otherwise, Mrs. Hart will be moved to Lakeside Care. Lakeside was the facility families warned each other about. Cheap, understaffed, hidden. Lena called Mr. Devereaux's office and got a bland voicemail. Now she called Director Patel and got no answer. She called the bank again and heard the same phrase. Access denied. By 2 a.m., she was sitting in the small chapel across from Willow Glen. Pews empty, hands clenched around her phone like a lifeline. Her mother's rosary hung from Lena's fingers. She tried to pray, but only numbers came. Friday, 7 a.m., $0. The chapel door creaked. A man stepped inside, rain-dark hair, production badge half hidden under his jacket. "I'm Michael," he whispered. "I work the cameras." He held up a hard drive and said, "I saw everything they did to you." Michael set the hard drive on the pew between them and flipped open his laptop. "I'm not supposed to keep raw footage," he said, voice low. "But your face on that screen? It didn't sit right." He tapped a folder labeled Hangar 9_feed. Timestamps marched in neat rows. Stage, donor lounge, service corridor. He clicked play. Lena saw Carter's hand place the sealed envelope into the guard's palm. Saw Marjorie's satisfied smile. Saw the host lean away as Lena reached for the mic. "It's all here," Michael said. "Uncut. Before their editor trims it into a charity highlight." Lena swallowed. "They took my keys. They stole the note. They're moving my mother at 7. Michael nodded. "I heard the security chief on comms. Lakeside Transport is confirmed." The chapel door opened, and cold air rolled in with a woman in a raincoat and sensible heels. She looked 50-something, silver streaks in her hair, eyes sharp behind reading glasses. Michael stood up fast. "Miss Ellison," he said, "thank you for coming." The woman extended a hand to Lena. "Grace Ellison, employment and licensing attorney." Her grip was firm, not pitying. "Michael called me an hour ago and told me you were being framed on a public stage." Lena's voice cracked. "I don't have money." Grace's expression didn't change. "You have a case. That's what matters." She set a thick file on the pew, printed emails, a call log, a still photo of Carter whispering into the host's ear. On top was a draft motion titled Emergency Injunction, Ruth Hart. "I can stop the transfer," Grace said, "but I need evidence that Ashford is using your mother as coercion." Lena reached into her bra and produced the tiny drive. This came from his house. Grace plugged it into her tablet. A thumbnail appeared, librarycam_02. Marjorie's voice filled the chapel, cruel and clear. Grace's eyes narrowed. "Good," she said. "Now we preserve everything." She scribbled notes. "At dawn we serve a preservation letter at the hangar, file the injunction, and get sworn statements from Director Patel and the woman who stood up for you." Lena's heart stuttered. "What if Carter shows?" Grace snapped her briefcase shut. "Let him. Courtrooms love bullies who think they're untouchable. If we're late, they'll take Ruth, and you'll have no leverage left." Then Grace glanced at the clock and said, "We have 40 minutes to beat his transport team." Grace drove like she argued, fast and certain. At 5:18 a.m., she and Lena walked into Willow Glen with Michael, carrying the hard drive in a grocery bag, like contraband. The night nurse at the desk looked up, wary, until Grace flashed her bar card. "Where's the transport paperwork?" Grace asked. "In administration," the nurse said, then softened when she saw Lena. "They're saying a husband authorized it." Grace turned to Lena. "You are the legal next of kin now. Divorce signed, separation documented. A notarized consent from Carter is fraud." They found the administrator in her office, coffee untouched, fax machine still warm. Grace laid her injunction draft on the desk and slid a recorder forward. "You're moving Ruth Hart at 7, she said. On whose authority? The administrator swallowed. Mr. Ashford's attorney sent guardianship papers, notarized. By whom? Grace asked. The woman hesitated. A notary named Sloane Keary. Grace's eyes snapped up. Keary is on Carter's payroll. She looked at Michael. Pull the donor lounge audio. Michael opened his laptop and played the clip he'd captured from the comms feed. Carter's voice filled the room. Friday is leverage. Use it. Then clearer. I'll make the complaint disappear. The administrator's face drained. That's him. Grace printed the audio transcript and pushed it under the administrator's hands. Sign a statement that you received pressure from Carter Ashford and that Ruth's transfer was initiated by his office, she said. If you don't, you'll be subpoenaed, and this facility will be on the evening news by dinner.